anybody has any good stories or anything they'd like to talk about, we'll just let you rattle on, and maybe we can pick up some ideas and so on like that. We got a young man here who's going to videotape us, so be sure and you talk distinctly and smile when you
straighten our hair.
Want to say something and so on like that. I'll get started here, and then Jerry can come on up. But
who's your young assistant doing the video?
Pardon?
Who is your young assistant doing the video?
Introduce yourself.
My name's Jerry Larson. I'm in high school right now. I've used all the equipment before.
Yeah.
Good to have these young people helping.
Well, yeah. Somebody has to take over once in a while.
Yeah, that's good.
They didn't announce it at the parade. They announced another bingo, but they didn't announce this.
It's all right.
Well, it wouldn't hurt.
Well, it wouldn't hurt, but there's enough of us here. What the heck? Everybody here gets to tell the story. We'll be here till 6 o'clock.
In the morning.
In the morning. Anyway, I was born here in Milford and grew up in Milford, and in kind of my residence for most of my life. And some of you have known me all my life, and I've known some of you all my life too. And I have to look at my birth certificate and my driver's license to make sure that I am that old. I can't be that old. There must be somebody else that's that old. Anyway, I never regretted my childhood growing up in Milford. I think it was very interesting, very worthwhile. I had wonderful, loving parents, and I think of my family today. We have three sons, and they live in I always say the 3 M's. One lives in Missouri, one lives in Montana, and the other lives in Minnesota. And so we don't always get to see, our families very often. I have a son right here now from St. Louis. If any of you ever driven to St. Louis, that's you might as well drive to Montana. It's 10.5 hours to get down to St. Louis. Anyway, I was real fortunate because I grew up over here in Milford and was born in a lot of that. How many of you were born at home? Here, how many of you were born at home?
I don't know, was I?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Who remembers?
Just you and your grandmother.
There, Barb.
Well, just you and your grandmother were there, But anyway, you talk to the younger people now today, they were all born in hospitals and so on like that. Anyway, my grandparents, my mother's parents, and their name was Sam and Georgia Holcomb, and they lived, their house faced east and ours faced west. We lived in the same block. And then my LaFoy grandparents lived just to the north, about a half a block. So, yeah, even when I was a little guy, probably 2 or 3, well, probably not 2, but probably 3 or 4 or 5, I floated in between all those houses, and nobody had ever locked their house. In fact, I don't even, anybody like our house, I don't know if we could ever find the key for the thing. Anyway, I spent a lot of time with both of my grandparents, and a lot of times went over there at night and so on like that. And the stories that they would tell and so on like that. I remember my grandmother Holcomb, she came into Dixon County in 1867. And they came by a covered wagon from La Crosse, Wisconsin, across here and so on. And she loved to tell about her early years here in Dixon County. And she was an avid reader. Probably one of my best stories was I taught school for 36 years, and I was only a part-time job. I had to do something in the summer, so I painted a lot of summers, and I was painting my Aunt Freda's house, and my grandmother was sitting on the front porch in there reading a book. And I had this young man, was a high school student, working with me, and he started laughing. He was going to fall off the scaffold, and I said, "What in the heck's your name, John? What's so funny?" Well, he said, "Would you look and see what my grandmother's reading?" And I looked at it, and I could see the back of the book, and it has Romance for Young Americans. And here she was, I think 90 years old or something like that, But the last thing And my aunt was always bringing her books from the library for her to read, but heavens help her if she brought a pioneer book about pioneers or about Indians. Those were two that she did not want to read about because she said she'd been there and done that. But she read a newspaper every day and and kept up pretty much on that. And she was also deaf. I learned very early in my life how to talk to people that were hard of hearing. And a lot of times we'd be talking to her, or and then she'd poke you and she'd say, "Quit yelling so loud, people will think I'm deaf." Anyway, she had a wonderful sense of humor and so on. So that was some of my story. Jerry, you're on.
A long time. In fact, when I have coffee with my friends every morning and afternoons, most of them would probably say, "Too long, been here too long," because I'm always ribbing somebody about something. But anyway, of course, my father was born here. My grandfather was born here. The old Clark house out east of Milford, the old stone house, it's still partially standing. And my great-grandfather, Jerome, he pretty much finished the house in about, like Audrey said, 1867. And so we've been around a long time, and history has kind of grown on me. What I'm doing now is going through the whole state of Iowa with pictures and business advertisements. And with my museum out there, we're the last month been up at the Maritime Museum. They're gradually taking a lot of my bigger items. I got a display up there, and we're gonna redo it every 2 weeks of a different town or county. And that way they feel they're gonna keep having new things, new faces coming in. But what I'd kind of like to do is kind of talk about how Milford got started down in Old Town, which I'm sure most all of you know. But a lot of people never maybe stop and realize why we were so late getting people into this area. And basically there was two reasons why. The first is nobody wanted to ever live up in this area because the winters were so severe and there was no trees. Trees were so important because you had to have wood to burn to keep warm. And then everything was prairie here. And what happened is that one of the presidents sent people up in this area to see why people weren't here. And then people went back and reported to him that it was inhabitable. I mean, you just couldn't live here. I mean, no trees. How could you survive? But then, when people did start coming, they came basically for this reason. You could buy ground, agriculture ground, which is why everyone was a farmer in the early years anyway. You could buy the ground half the price that you could out east, and you'd grow twice as much because the ground was fertile, kept being prairie. And so when people started coming into what we call Old Town area now, well, the first thing they did was build a mill, a sawmill and a flour mill. And the ground was purchased by a guy by the name of Foster. And he bought 160 acres from the federal government, from the United States government, for $1.25 an acre. That's what just about all all the ground was purchased for $1.25 an acre. And most all the ground in Dixon County was bought through the Redemption Act. The Homestead Act hadn't came yet. So most of the ground was bought. And when more people came, the flour mill really got to be a good business. In fact, I've read stories where that was the only mill for many miles, and people would come there to get their wheat ground, and they might have to camp out a day or 2 days to wait their turn to be at the mill. Well, waiting that long, business people came in and they built a couple hotels and so the general stores. Everything was a general store in the early years. And then in about 1872, 3 and 4, there was a heck of a money panic in our area. The people that came here all left, basically, because the grasshoppers ruined the crops. There was for about 4 years that you could, there was nothing raised. Well, people farming had to make a living, so they packed up and sold out and went to where they could grow something. And so this item here I did bring. This is, I'll kind of pass it around. This kind of shows how big that mill pond was east of Milford, where the mill, how the water was backed up. And like, if you go down where the old dump hill is, which most people here recall, well, that whole area down there was the part of the pond, and the people, like the Paulies that lived here, they had their little addition. They could go right down the hill. In fact, they had a little boat livery and sold bait and stuff there. So I'll just kind of pass that, or you
Jerry,
folks
where's
can
the
look
Terrell
at it.
Road on here?
Pardon?
What we call the Terrell Road or land?
That isn't showing.
I know it wouldn't, but I just wondered.
It'd be north, it'd be north of there,
over in here.
over to the right of
No,
it.
the Terrell Road. The Terrell Road in the early years, if you go up the courthouse and look at the plats, that was called Clark Road. Because my great-grandfather that had the old stone house, he was basically about the only one out in that area and helped get the road developed there. But one thing I kind of would like to read to you folks, it's in the Milford Centennial book. A lot of you might have remembered reading it, but I wanted to just tell you what an important man this John Lawler that platted the town and laid it out of Milford. And I'm just going to read this to you here quick, and then I'll sit down. It says, the beginning of present Milford. The land upon which the present Milford was laid out was purchased from John Lawler. The town was planned by him, surveyed, platted, and the plat filed at the Dixon County Courthouse on August 21st, 1882. Few family names in Wisconsin were more widely known than the Lawler name. The Lawler families, brothers, uncles, sons all worked together and were interested in town sites along the railroad. Alice Sturgis, a daughter of S.D. Sturgis, married a Lawler. Her brother James A. Sturgis was killed along with Custer at the Little Bighorn. The town of Sturgis, South Dakota was named in his memory. Alice's sister Nina became the wife of Hercule Duesman. The Duesmans had been in the American Fur Trade Company with John Jacob Astor, which I'm sure most all of you recall that in the history. They were very wealthy. The Dudesman's mansion in Prairie du Chien was as elegant as anything west of the Alleghenies. It is now a museum. The Lawler family was a director of the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul system, and had a contract with the railroad to transport all its business, both freight and passengers, between Prairie du Chien and McGregor across the Mississippi River. About 1879, the Lawlers conceived the idea to build a bridge across the river to connect Prairie du Chien and McGregor. The Lawler name was also known as president of the Northwestern Packet Company, a riverboat company, and also as vice president of the McGregor and Sioux City Railroad Company. The Lawler family was chiefly instrumental in establishing the Catholic College and Convent at Prairie du Chien. The Lawler name was very popular in Mitchell, South Dakota, as the family owned the first hotel, the Lawler House, and the First National Bank. And the family helped establish the Corn Palace at Mitchell, which came from Sioux City, Iowa. See, the Corn Palace was in Sioux City first. And then a daughter also became Mrs. John S. Pillsbury of Minneapolis and St. Paul, Minnesota, the Flower Pillsburys. A book could be written about the Lawler families, and it is interesting that our town, Milford, in celebrating its 100th birthday, which is the book, was founded by such a prominent family. It'd be interesting to know how many other towns were also started like Milford by the Lawlers, which going over the state of Iowa with the history and pictures that I'm doing, his name pops up very, very often. Just like the most common name that I've ever seen in Iowa is a guy by the name of John Boyer. He named over 80 towns in Iowa, like Lamar, Aurelia, all the towns off in through there. And when he passed away, he